So good morning, Rosian Hapusa. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk with you about the host-guest metaphor that I use with my students. As you know, my work is really centered on the idea of collaborative relationships and dialogical conversations. And by that I mean a partnership process in which the client and the therapist engage with each other in a mutual inquiry or a shared inquiry about the issues at hand, what's important to the client, keeping the conversation focused on that. It's based on also on the idea that relationships and conversations go hand in hand. That is, the way we begin to relate to someone, develop a relationship with someone, begins to influence and inform the way that we'll be able to talk with each other, and vice versa, the way that we begin to talk with each other influence the kind of relationship that we'll be able to develop with each other. So it's how do you invite someone to be collaborative? How do you invite someone to join you in dialogue? Another way I think about it is, how do you invite someone to be curious with you about their life circumstances in ways that they haven't been able to be curious before? And my students always ask this, well, how do you do this? Tell me how you do it. Well, for those of you who are familiar with my work, you know that I don't think in terms of techniques or structured or step-ordered therapy. So it's the challenge of how do you share with students sort of the essence of, or the concept that I'm talking about when I talk about collaborative relationships and dialogical conversations. So I say to them that the important thing is the idea of meeting and greeting, going back to the idea of relationships and conversations going hand in hand. That how you begin to meet and greet someone, how you welcome them into your space, begins to set the tone for what you'll be able to do and accomplish together. So I draw from Derrida's idea of unconditional hospitality, that you have to be an unconditional host and guest in the client's life. So I say to my students that in therapy, you are always a host and you are always a guest, and that both of those relationships are a temporary and a transitional relationship in specific circumstances with specific agendas. So as a host, as a therapist, you're hosting the client in your space. And when I say space, I'm referring to both literal, physical space, and I'm referring to a metaphorical space. And I say at the same time, you're not only hosting them in your space, but you're also a guest in their lives. Again, a very temporary, transitional guest. And so I use this host-guest metaphor, and I ask my students to do a little exercise. I say, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to sit and think about a time that you were a guest in someone's home, someone's office, a meeting at someone's church, at someone's school. And what did that person who was the host do that made you feel like a welcome guest, that made you feel like they were interested in you, what you had to say, and most importantly, made you feel they'd probably invite you back again? So I ask them to sit and think about that for a few minutes, and then depending on the number of students, I have them in either pairs or groups of 3 or 4 to share these experiences with each other, and for each conversational cluster of students to come up with what they think are the characteristics of a good host. And by good, I say a good host, meaning a host, as I said, that makes you feel warm and welcome, they're interested in you, and that you're a special person in their space. So they do that, we come back and we discuss that, and then I say, okay, now I want you to think of a time that you were a host, and that you were hosting someone in your office, in your home, a meeting at a school, a meeting in a team meeting, and think about the kinds of guests that you had. And what are the kinds of guests who you really enjoyed, okay? What did they do? How were they? Did they come in and wait for you to offer them a chair? Or did they sit in your favorite chair and put their feet up on your favorite table that you don't put your feet on? Did they walk into your kitchen and take out the orange juice or your favorite bottle of champagne without asking? Worse yet, were they really nosy? Did they go into your bathroom and open up your cabinet to see what kind of medicines you take? So I say, think about the kinds of guests that you had. And what are the kinds of guests that you enjoyed, that you would like to invite back, and that you think really appreciated your hosting them? So again, I have them think about that individually, because what I want them to do, I want people to be aware of the importance of taking the time to think about something, to form one's thoughts. And then once you begin to put it into spoken words with another person, or even written on the page of a paper, how those thoughts begin to form into something more than what was rolling around in your head. And then as you engage more in the open dialogue with your other conversational partners, the other students, how what the other students say begin to influence your original thoughts and what you've just said, so that it's a dual learning process of not only beginning to learn about and focus on the idea and the importance of meeting and greeting and being a good host and a good guest, but you're also thinking about the generative process in terms of putting thoughts, silent conversations into spoken or written conversations.